We apparently are live, Unleashed, episode 2. We're getting in our warrior brain, warrior mentality. We're throwing punches, and I've got an incredible special guest on this second ever Unleashed episode, Michael Smikin. I'm welcoming you to the platform and the stage here. You've been what I'd say, fast friend, but almost like brother from another mother in a number of the different conversations we've had. And you're up to some incredible things, from being a world-class attorney to a person who is really gifted and skilled in communication and influence. And little did I know, the arts of the quote unquote warrior brain. So how are you today? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And David, every single time that you and I speak, I'm so thoroughly impressed with who you are and how you appear in the world, the things that you're doing, whether it's the corporate coaching work, whether it's the fact that you're deciding to write a book, like in the meantime, and that you're constantly exploring personal growth and development. I just want to honor you for being you and how incredible you show up every single day. So thank you for allowing me to be here and share the stage with you. But I'm just, again, so thoroughly impressed with you.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's you or it's me or it's just maybe the both of our dynamics, but there always seems to be some electricity going on, and we probably have a lot of similar, I think, touch points in our lives and things that we're up to and interested in and focused on. So it's been a pleasure, and here we are. So what should we talk about today? We're gonna jump in, and we talked on Sunday in a very dynamic conversation about morning routines and getting over this thing right here and moving forward. But when you say warrior brains, I think that's what you tossed at me. Do you want to share a little bit in terms of what that means to you, where that came from, and we can riff off of that?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. And I appreciate it. It's a fantastic question. So warrior brain is kind of, it's not a term that I created. It's just, it has a very powerful meaning to me. And, by way of background, I'm an attorney, a litigator for many years, national trial counsel. I had 2 top 100 national jury verdicts. And the way that I was able to get there was I had learned an important technique from my mentor. His name is Sean Calicky, and he taught me a formula called integrity-based human influence. And an important critical piece of that formula is this little sub niche, right? And I say that a little tongue in cheek, is something called influence mastery. And influence mastery is a superpower that gives you the ability to make people say yes to whatever it is that you want. The critical piece of that being integrity. And when he gave me that skill set, he allowed me to multiply my abilities, amplify, how I already appeared in the world, and he changed the trajectory of my life. Now, in order to get to a place where you're engaging in the highest level of influence mastery, there's a really big piece of that, and that's yourself, right? Your state and your self-mastery. And when you're in highly conflictual type situations, in order to bring a very powerful energy that brings people into a place where they say yes, even when they want to fight with you, you have to have this warrior brain. You have to have this ferocity to you, and you need to be able to access it strategically, because if you do it all the time and you're just like this explosive force that appears inside the universe, people hate dealing with you. But if you can use it strategically, right, with a very outcome-oriented approach, you start to produce these really amazing results. And so that's kind of a little bit one of the things that I really have studied, have dived into, have spent a lot of my own time in personal growth and development trying to get better and better and better at, to produce better and better and better results for my clients.
So much to touch on there. The first thing I was thinking about was I had a conversation earlier today with so I was doing some training for the 10,000 Black Interns platform, and a lot of young professionals working on their communication skill set. And when you said get inside that, you didn't say peak state, but you used a different word, but I had shared that kind of approach before interviews. You should go get your energy, get yourself juiced up so that you're at a certain level. You're not low energy, reserved. And so he told me, he said, I went downstairs in the bathroom, and danced and got myself all amped up. And when I got on the interview, I was actually sweating. It became something we talked about, but my energy level, and I feel like that really fueled me through how that all went. So I think that's an incredible dynamic that just showed itself up. But the question I would have for you inside of what you just shared is, was this something that you significantly have shifted for yourself? And were you able to like see that shift? Because when I think about my own transformation, sometimes it's, yeah, like this was before, maybe 5 years ago, this is after, but the micro stuff in between, I'm wondering how you work through some of those things.
Yeah, no, it is such a cool question, because I was literally putting the intention into the universe, because there's nothing that I enjoy more than my conversations with you, because we love sharing these dynamics. We love sharing those epiphany moments, as those aha, how it all happened. And I could tell you exactly when that shift happened. I could tell, like, if I needed to, I could probably go back and tell you the day and time. So I was at a hearing, right? Yeah, it was probably 2013-ish, 2012-ish time frame. And my partner, Sean, who I talk about a lot, my law partner, he did these things, right? And when I first saw him doing them, and I'll tell you a little bit about those techniques, I'm like, whoa, this guy's a little bit strange. He gets amazing results, but like that thing that he just did was really unusual. And he would do push-ups in the bathroom, right? He'd go to court. He talked about it openly. He would rip off two pieces of paper towel, because the floors are disgusting in the courtrooms, and he would do push-ups on the floor in the bathroom of the courtrooms. He'd go into a back room or something, and he would listen to music, and he would like clap his hands really loudly. He would like shout and scream and like just put himself in this highly energetic state. And I remember going, wow, it really works for him. I'm never going to do that. But I was at a hearing one time, and it was a really, really important case. And it was a really important hearing that I was on, that I was about to argue. And I got a really angry call from a client, right? Not with something that I had done, but something happened, and he was really frustrated. And I had to talk him off the ledge. And I had been in a really good state right up until that moment. And then he called me. And then like his agitated energy, his angry energy, the whole nine yards just washed all over me. And when I was done with the telephone call, I'm like, oh, I feel gross, right? I'm like not in the right headspace right now. Like that was really stressful, really frustrating. I'm like, I got to do something. And so I'm like, I'm going to do it, right? The thing that I saw Sean do, I'm going to do it. And I walked out of the courtroom. The hearing had not started yet. I walked out of the courtroom. I walked into like an attorney lounge where other attorneys like go to like prepare for a hearing. And there was an attorney in the room, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go find some quiet corner in this attorney lounge. And I did it, right? I blasted music. I started clapping my hands. I started screaming, right? And I'm sure that guy probably thought I was absolutely out of my mind nuts, but instantaneously it put me into that peak state, right? Which the word was you used, which I referred to as the warrior brain. That kind of like aggressive energy just started like pouring out of me, that Zeus energy. And I'm like, whoa, this worked. I went in, rocked the hearing. And from that day on, I began to do anything that I could to put myself at the highest level of whatever state I needed to be in. And it's not always an aggressive state, right? Like I used to do that when I was younger as a young attorney. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to be like that ferocious animal, and that's the energy that people are going to get from me. But what I came to learn is that sometimes in influence, that ferocious energy, that Zeus energy is important, but sometimes it's better to connect with people from a heart place. And so there's things that you can do to put yourself in like a peak heart state, a peak loving state. And since then, that's been my exploration to just do that. So it was such an awesome question, because I know exactly the answer to it.
That's cool, because I don't know that I have that kind of distinction for myself, but I love that's what showed up. One thing I was thinking of, because I would do Toastmasters. You're familiar with Toastmasters, public speaking?
I am.
And how I would feel after I gave a speech, I felt alive. I felt like I could connect with people, but it was almost that adrenaline rush from being on stage that put me in a peak state after. And so that's what I tell people to do ahead of time. If they are in this mode, is like get into that peak state before you give the speech. Don't feel it after the release of it. But there's a technique to the physiology that can significantly impact how you show up and the results that you're producing out there.
Yeah, and David, I think the point that you're bringing home, and it's such a beautiful point, and I want to make sure that I honor it. that, you could go through life and just be in the flow, right? And you will become almost at effect of the world around you and your life circumstances. And that is a way to live, right? And I'm not going to sit here and judge anybody who chooses to do that for whatever reason. But for me, right, and clearly for you, what I've come to realize is that my state in any given interaction can have a profound impact on that interaction. So if I'm in a lousy state and then you, David, call me, right, I'm gonna communicate with you with lousy energy, right, with weak energy, and I think that's dishonoring you, right? That's not giving you the benefit of the best of me. And so I have chosen to say, like, I'm going to do things that put myself in a peak state. Like, it is very unusual for me to be sitting in a chair, right, when I'm talking to anybody.
Yeah.
I have to do that just because that's my setup. But if I had it all my way, I wouldn't be sitting.
We gotta get you one of those standing desks so we can put it up and down.
I have it downstairs. I haven't set it up yet. It's there, right?
Yeah.
I'm with you. But when I'm on a telephone call, right, I never stop walking, right? I'll usually put 20 to 25,000 steps, maybe even 30,000 steps on a day, because when I'm on the phone, I want to be forward progress, momentum, and that's the energy that I want to be delivering on the calls when I'm communicating with people.
I love it. So one thing that I want to share, actually it's a question and a share. One is an acknowledgement of how well, whatever I say, you make it sound like it's, I know I can communicate, but you make it sound like it's like the best thing since sliced bread. So I just want to acknowledge you for the way that you acknowledge me or anyone inside of a conversation. And that leads to my question is, do you, at this point, because I know you know the formula and you're such a skilled communicator, do you know that you're doing, or are you conscious that it's what you're doing, or it's just automatic and you're just in flow?
So it's automatic, and I think you're picking up the most important part of the formula itself, and that's the very first word. It's integrity-based, right? Integrity-based human influence. And so when I'm communicating with you, and I'm on the phone with you, and I'm here present in this moment, I want to listen to you at the crazy highest levels. So like, I am not only hearing what you're saying, I'm hearing what you're feeling. I'm hearing what you're not saying, right? With your nonverbal communications, I'm hearing the entirety of you, right? Because I don't think that there's a greater gift that you could give to people to make them feel good about themselves than to really hear them, really see them, and really understand them at the crazy highest levels. And so it is unconscious at this point, because it's so deeply ingrained in me that I want to give you that gift as part of our communication, that anytime that we're together and we're spending time together, I want to give you that gift, because it's the easiest thing for me to do is just to hear you, right? And to listen to you and to answer your questions. So unconscious, in integrity, because if it wasn't, you would feel it. Most people can't describe it, but they feel it. Some people can describe it and they go, wow, this guy's like really like, he's weird salesy energy, feels uncomfortable. If it's out of integrity, you can feel it, which is why the integrity piece of integrity-based human influence is the most critical piece of the conversation.
I just wanted to say, I love the way you said that. Give the person the gift of that kind of focus, that kind of attention, that kind of listening. It's such a nice way to put it, because a lot of times when we're communicating with people, one, we don't know that we're not paying attention to them, or two, we're actively strategizing for how this is going to go versus actually giving them the gift of that kind of attention, that kind of presence. And what we discuss often in the community in general is when you show up that way, unattached to the outcomes you're actually looking for show up that much more frequently and in abundance. So it's pretty cool how that all flushes out.
Yeah, and just so, that's a beautiful access. If I could just share these 2 points. Most of the time when you're trying to think of the next thing to say, right, and you're not really listening to the person on the other side, it's because there's some part of you that's afraid, right? Your ego, the part of you that's afraid of getting hurt, is implicated. And so it's like, oh, okay, I got to listen to what he's saying because I need to argue the point, or I need to win this next point. And so your bandwidth is not actually present inside the conversation. Your bandwidth is in the future, right? Or in the past, right? Which is worse. like, oh, I can't believe you just said that. I'm so offended by it, right? Like, I'm not here. I'm not actually present in the conversation. And that's when a person can feel that you're not really listening to them. You could do a halfway decent job, right? Because the person's like, oh, okay, he kind of gets it. But if you're thinking about the next thing to say, you're there, right? You're not here.
Yeah. And I want to honor time integrity because I know we want to touch on a couple of topics. But right before we do that, my other question that I had was, like, a lot of this now, as you said, is just automatic. You just show up that way. And I got to imagine prior to meeting Sean Callaghy or prior to coming into this kind of formula technology, doing these things, you were still a dynamic communicator. Was there a significant shift in, so you might say that, well, I guess that's where I would be looking, is like, where did you notice some of all of this mastery coming into place? Was it over time? Is it now automatic and you're always elevating? How do you look at it from that perspective?
Yeah, so tremendous question. So before I joined up with Sean Callaghy, I did a lot of public speaking, right? Like in law school, I determined that I wanted to be a trial attorney, right? I fell in love with it. I was a founding member of the mock trial team. I won my school's mock trial competition. I went out and I nationally presented, but I presented with a false energy, right? An inauthentic, incongruent energy. And that was the energy of a professional lawyer and what I thought all of that actually meant. It took me a long time to break out of that shell and start communicating with who I really am, my essence, deep down inside, that I am an emotional person and I communicate with emotion as opposed to very like, well, Your Honor, I disagree with this argument. And so, yeah, I had a comfort with public speaking, but I didn't communicate well, at least not how I would measure it today. And I promise you, like, this is not born. This was not, hey, I created it back in high school. This is through the crucible over a period of 12 years and really, really identifying and parsing out what it is that really makes a person influential. And it can be broken down into 18 different things, right? To really teach a person on how to communicate very effectively in a way that's both integrous, authentic, and influential, to give a person the ability, anybody can learn the skill set, to give them the ability to convince someone of something that they should do, but always in integrity, right? That's where the manipulation versus coercion comes in. If it's in integrity, influence is certainly appropriate, like convincing a person to stop using heroin, right? Or convince a client that their strategy that they're dealing with, a colleague of theirs or another shareholder in the company is a horrible strategy, right? Like, these are things that you want to be able to influence people with.
Yeah, so well said. And I can't help but be struck myself by some of the parallels. Like, we have different paths, but in a lot of ways, I'll just share a little bit about the similarity in the path. Is I was a shy kid in school, scared to be social, awkward, even into college, into professional career. And at some point, it was actually in a training session where I saw myself on camera that I was like, wow, I got to do something, or I want to do something. I get to do something. I'm reframing it now about this. And then I started going on my own journey of Toastmasters, improvisational comedy, to Landmark, Tony, all this different stuff that was there. But the point that you hit me with earlier was I became a very good speaker in the sense that I could convey a message a certain way, but I was not coming from the authenticity, the heart, the essence that you pointed to. And that's really where I've been in my journey the past little while of bringing both of those dynamics together. Some polished acumen, but then the heart and the authenticity that flows through, because I think that's really where the, as you said, the integrity and the dynamics of communication come into play.
Yeah, I was speaking to one of our shared colleagues, and I asked him, like, when he had told me he was in sales and he was really interested in continuing to develop it. And I said, well, it's great that you're in sales, but what business are you really in? And he was like, well, I'm out here doing this. I'm like, yeah, that's what you do, but what business are you actually in when you're trying to influence someone? And he was like, well, now I'm confused. What is it? And I'm like, you're in the emotional transportation business, right? Because you may be able to convince most people to do what it is that you want them to do. But when you're in a conflictual situation or a highly conflictual situation, those normal things that you do are not going to work. And the only way that you're going to influence someone to do anything is going to start with your ability to transport emotionally, because they are going to ascribe or say that you're approaching a conversation with one intention when you're really approaching it with the other. And if you can't communicate in a way that takes your energy and transports it to the other person to take them on the emotional journey that you need them to go on, you're never going to be able to get a person from here to there where you need them to go. And so I think what's so beautiful about the journey that you're describing is that emotional transportation journey, the ability to like really lock in on like what you're feeling in the moment and use all of your tools that are available, your vocal qualities, right? Your pitch, the speed with which you deliver something, whether it's fast or slow, right? The pauses that you use, you know, going up in volume, down in volume, and all of those things. You have all these tools available to you, really take people on an emotional journey. And again, it's by trial and error and conditioning, right? So like, if I use something and you're like, Mike, you made me feel really awkward, right? You're going to give me a negative association with what I just did. But if I'm successful over and over and over again by communicating a certain way, it's going to get conditioned inside my brain. Use that, use that, use that. And it's always to get towards a beautiful outcome. Otherwise, it's inauthentic and out of integrity.
So well said. I mean, I feel like we could probably talk for hours. It's about like, just riffing off all this stuff. We did have in the title cold shower. So I do want to touch on that before we wrap up in a little bit. But cold showers was something I've always known from a long time ago, like tried it out, done all these things, and then we talked about it. And you've been on your own journey recently. Do you want to give a little background of what you've been implementing recently, and then we can jump into some of the benefits, dynamics, and all of that?
Yeah, sure. So like in the theme of this isn't just what I am. Like, I'm not born this way. It wasn't genetics. It wasn't anything. I'm constantly finding ways to improve who I am and how I arrive inside the world. And what I began to realize was, I don't start putting myself in state until it's time for me to need to be in state. And then I would use techniques in order to do it. And I have a lot of them, right? Like in hearings, I would pace back and forth. I wouldn't sit down. I would be standing until the judge told me to sit, right? I would clap my hands really loud, listen to certain types of music, but I would use techniques to put myself in that state, whatever state I needed to be. And what I realized was that, like, what an inefficient way to like live your life, that you have to use certain techniques to put yourself in state. Wouldn't it be great if it just became part of your ritual, right? That in the morning, the first thing you do is you find ways to put yourself into that peak state, into that whatever state it is that you want to live in, whether it's a Zeus, strategic, aggressive, powerful state, or like an open, nurturing, inviting, like a goddess energy, or an aspirational, something in the future to like inspire people. And so what I began to do was I began to use meditation in the mornings to put myself in a very like open and present state, because it's a beautiful place to live in, the here and now, which helped to calm my central nervous system and take stress and anxiety away from me. And I used to run on anxiety, right? Like that was my fuel, like stress, fear, distortion, like what do I do? Who do I attack? How do I get prepared? And that's what I utilized to get ready in the day. And then what I found was that there was an amazing substitute, and that is like, just be here, right? Be here now, attentive. And what that's allowed me to do is to bend time, right? Because if you're thinking about things in the future, you're not present to all the things that are going on in the present. And so time flies. But when you're present in the moment, like in your body, you do something even as simple as, rubbing your fingers together and being present to the feeling of your two fingers rubbing together and being really inside your body and connected to it, you become much more present. And there's hacks, right, that you could use to get there. And one of the hacks is cold showers. So cold showers, right, like I'll just tell you the science behind it. The minute you step your butt into a cold shower or plunge yourself into an ice cold bath, which a lot of people do, you have an immediate physiological response. So what do I mean? Your body reacts to the extreme cold. And anybody who's ever been inside the cold knows exactly what that is. Your heart rate goes up like a crazy amount, right? your heart rate goes up a crazy amount. You immediately feel pain in your fingers and wherever the cold is. So like if the cold is hitting you in the chest, you feel pain. And what that pain is when the cold hits your skin, you have certain thing called vasoconstriction. So your veins begin to constrict to force the blood away from the surface and into your core to keep your core nice and warm. So you have vasoconstriction, some pain, your heart rate goes up, and your brain goes, panic, right? This is not good. This is not healthy. I can't sustain this. Your brain releases norepinephrine. It signals the pituitary gland or whatever part of the brain releases cortisol, right? Which causes you to feel some level of panic, right? Cortisol is the stress hormone. Norepinephrine causes you to be very present. And so what a cold shower does is it hacks the brain. And it tells the brain, become very present, put yourself in an agitated, stressful state, and let's get the heart going because now we're about to go into battle, right? Because it doesn't know what the stress is, because it doesn't have like eyeballs on the outside that go, what is this stress? It just knows that there's a threat. So now it puts you into like this heightened state where you're very present. And the minute you finish doing that, your brain then rewards you. Thank you, right? Thank you for stopping the cold from coming. It thanks you by releasing something inside your brain from the endocannabinoid region. I forgot where it is, the insula or whatever it is, releases endocannabinoids, which actually make you feel very relaxed and euphoric, i.e. high. So here you go, norepinephrine makes you super present. Cortisol, which actually is a major stressor, also gives you a high level of attention span. And you're also getting a feeling of euphoria. So you've hacked your brain to give you all of these feel-good things. What do you think that does to your state? If you're present, feeling good, and literally indestructible, and the one thing that actually does cause you the most amount of stress in the day is a cold shower, how can somebody telling you missed a telephone call or you're late for something actually stress you out? Because your brain's like, yeah, okay, I had a real stressful event this morning. That freezing cold thing, that was stress. This is not. Yeah. And so cold showers has been something that I've implemented inside of my morning ritual, which has literally changed my life and the way that I approach things in terms of my state, in terms of my ability to influence people and to connect with them in an integrous way.
And so you've seen it as what it does in the morning, but it stays with you. There's a certain presence that it creates for you from the beginning of the day and carries on into all the other avenues throughout the day. 100%.
And by the way, if you're a caffeine drinker and you wanted a quick caffeine, cold showers in the morning, that will wake you up, I promise.
And now I mean, we're going to wrap up in just a moment, but like digging in a little bit more, unless you have a few extra minutes, but what's the length of time? What's the formula? Because sometimes I think cold shower, I jump in for 30 seconds. I know you and I have had some conversations now, and today I did Enter Sandman, Metallica for 5 minutes and 32 seconds, and that was a whole new dynamic. But what's the even middle ground, or what would you say if people are like, well, let me try that out? How should they approach it?
Well, I will say that you're doing it for 5 minutes and plus, and I'm doing it for 3 minutes. So maybe I should be asking you your advice. So what do you do when you get inside the shower?
Well, the reality is I do it after my long run. So I'm trying to figure out, because I know I've experienced cold showers where I'm there for 30 seconds and I want to get out. But I think my heart, my body energy and heat is so high that the cold isn't as dramatic for me in that moment. So I don't know that I'm curious about how much it's given me benefit, but I'm sure it is. So I can point to 4 things right now that I guarantee are giving you massive benefit right now. Like I can identify what they are. You're coming in there with a hot body, right? You probably got lactic acid pumping through your system. You got a lot of heat. Your body is taking your blood from your core and pushing it into your skin, right? So your skin is probably flushed as well. By putting the cold water on your body when it's that hot, you're literally pumping nice ice cold water to all of those sore muscles and decreasing inflammation inside your system, which anybody will tell you is key to recovery, right? And key to repairing good, strong muscles by decreasing inflammation. So you're absolutely doing that. I will tell you though, that there is a secret to making it much easier, right? And it is actually unlocked inside of our genetics. So we are all mammals, right? Whether you choose to agree in evolution or not, we have much in common with other mammals, depending on your viewpoints in life. But there is a reflex that all mammals have called the mammalian dive reflex.
And what the mammalian dive reflex basically does is it prepares your body for holding your breath and intense cold. And so if you were to, right after your run, go into the ice cold shower, put your head under the cold shower, hold your breath, and then allow the water to wash over your face and especially your nostril area, you're actually going to trigger that mammalian dive reflex, which is going to prepare, which your brain is then going to prepare your body for intense cold, which will also numb some of the pain that you're going to feel when the cold hits it, which, by the way, you've already done by running. So your brain is already releasing endorphins, which dull your pain sensors. And so you probably feel less of the cold than I do because I don't run in the morning.
Well, it's interesting now that you gave the science and the background to it. I've organically, it wasn't intentional, but that's what I do when I put the cold water on first, is I go head first. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm doing exactly what you're saying to do, but I'm doing some version of it. And I wonder if that just showed up because, I don't know, the nature of it.
You were conditioned, right? So like the one time you did it where it hit your chest first, you're like, that's painful. And then you did it with your head and your face first, and you're like, okay, that felt really good. And so your brain conditioned you to do it from then on. What you didn't realize was you were triggering a genetic reflex that exists that says, hey, let's prepare this way for the cold, you know? And so you were just conditioned to do it. But yeah, like it's there, it works.
Fascinating. Well, we'll wrap up in just a moment, but I guess question is, how do you know all this stuff? Is there, like, have you dug in, like looked at it from a number of different angles? Was it a book you read, or like how would you, somebody want to explore some of this science and beyond? Is there anything you might guide or path to?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. I am not and never have been a very woo-woo guy, right? Like I don't believe in a lot of kind of we'll call it the new age, I want to be careful with my terminology. I was going to use the word nonsense, but turns out that I actually was very poorly informed when I used to call things nonsense. But there's a lot of like pseudo and pop culture science that's out there. And so I was very skeptical of it whenever I hear these things. And so whenever I find something that makes common sense to me, right? Like that kind of makes sense, right? Like, yes, like we're all mammals. And yes, it makes sense that mammals would have some kind of reflex when they're about to go underwater, or how else would they be successful at doing it as often as they did? I would then go and study, and I'd look up actual like peer-reviewed studies. I'd look at like resources like the NIH. I'd do some Google searches and try to find peer-reviewed studies on some of these things. And then I read about what the study actually tested and what was the results of the study and compare it to other studies. And once I start to see that there's a commonality amongst the results that many different studies are finding, then I become much more interested in and embracing some of the things that I hear. So, you know, I learned about breathing techniques, certain breathing techniques that allow you to hold your breath longer, and the science between hyperventilation and hypoventilation actually helps to increase your present state and also your mental acuity. And so I'm like, that kind of makes sense. Like, you know, people at some point hyperventilate, hypoventilate, let me study this. And there was studies by, you know, Michigan and Wisconsin that said holding your breath for any period of time and doing it in a practice sense causes the body to react. So when you hold your breath and you start running out of oxygen, your body goes into something called IBMs, involuntary breath movements. And if you skip enough IBMs, your brain goes into panic mode, and the panic mode causes the release of norepinephrine, cortisol, and all of those hormones and neurotransmitters, which cause you to feel things. So these are all like brain hacks that are absolutely available. What a great time we live in that you can actually look at these studies and say, this is BS, this is true, this is BS, this is true, and apply what works and what doesn't work. So
if you don't believe it, jump in a cold shower and see if it works.
Yeah, exactly. Do it for 20 days and see how you react.
Amazing. I feel like we could probably have 20 more of these episodes, but we should probably wrap it up at this point. One quick acknowledgement is I feel like we've had a number of conversations, and just in the giving the gift, as you said earlier, I've always asked, like, what can I do for you? And of like really being in service of other people in any kind of dynamic that you're in. And I'll say for myself, like that's been a touching and inspiring point of view that I've taken on and tried to really embrace for myself. So I just want to say that you're making a difference for me, and certainly this conversation was a dynamic one. So I appreciate you giving your time and being episode number 2. So this was fun.
It's amazing. And I just want to share how much you inspire me, right? Like there's so many things that I now begin to do that you do. And you push me. And the truth of it is, and I hope everybody understands this and they understand this about David. David is when he joins your peer group, he has expectations of you, right? And he has expectations of you developing and achieving your greatness. And he has pushed me to achieve my greatness. And I think it's such a wonderful thing to have inside your peer group, somebody like David, who is understanding, who acknowledges, who appreciates, when you have that moment of weakness, but he pushes you to like really to achieve that next higher level. And he's been an inspiration for me. And I'm sure, I don't know what impact you've had on other people's lives, but if it's even a fraction of what you've done for me, I can't even imagine what else and who else's lives you're actually touching. So I just want to honor you for that.
I love it, my friend. This is a fast friendship, but a growing one. And I'm glad that we've connected and had this conversation, and I'm looking forward to many more. So all the best on your journey, and we'll be talking very soon. But thank you for being a part of this. This was awesome.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, David.